Have you ever been at a family meal and someone asked something simple like, "How's work going these days?" And maybe you answered honestly, "Actually, it's been stressful." Then someone responded, not with curiosity, but with advice. "You should just switch jobs." Or worse, stress at your age? Wait till you have real responsibilities. That small moment when you hope to be heard turns into a subtle kind of argument. You no longer feel safe to share, and slowly you pull back. And it's not just family dinners, it's online, at work, with friends. Everywhere people are talking. Loudly, quickly, and passionately, but not always with care. I used to think that being right was the goal, that a good argument was about making strong points, winning over the other side. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized most of us aren't trying to connect. We're just trying to defend ourselves, protect what we believe, hold on to certainty. Bosa, a world champion debater, once said something that stayed with me. He said the real crisis today isn't that people disagree, it's that we've forgotten how to disagree well. And I think he's right. Somewhere along the way, we replaced curiosity with defensiveness. We listen just enough to prepare our reply, not to understand. And when that happens, arguments become noise, and connection gets lost in the middle. So the question is, what if there's a better way? Not to avoid disagreement, but to do it with more clarity, more care, and maybe even with more kindness. That's where we begin, with a simple but powerful idea, one that might help us turn arguments into real conversations. Let's start with a tool that can help us decide when it's actually worth stepping into a debate. The RISA framework. Not every conversation needs to become a debate. A casual question from a friend or a small comment at work, and suddenly we're defending ourselves, explaining too much, or feeling misunderstood. And often it doesn't lead anywhere useful. That's where the RISA framework comes in. Created by Bosa, a world champion debater, it's a simple mental checklist to decide whether a conversation is worth diving into, or better left alone. Here's how it works. R stands for real. Ask yourself, is this disagreement actually real? Sometimes what we think is a strong difference is really just a misunderstanding. Maybe we interpreted someone's tone the wrong way or assumed a meaning that wasn't there. Imagine a colleague says, "You're late again." Depending on how you hear it, you might take it as a joke or as a criticism. But before responding, it helps to pause and ask, are we really in disagreement, or are we reacting too fast? I is for important. Does this truly matter? Is it something that will affect the relationship, the project, the goal? Or is it a small frustration we're holding on to just because we're tired, stressed, or having a rough day? We've all had moments when we argued over things we didn't even care about, just because we were in the mood to push back. S is for specific. Is the topic clear and focused? Or is it vague, emotional, or tangled up in past history? Let's say you're talking with someone about how they forgot to return a message. It starts with that, but quickly it turns into, "You never listen," or "You always ignore me." And suddenly it's not about the message anymore. It's about every small hurt from the last 6 months. If we can't keep things specific, we end up arguing about everything and solving nothing. A is for aligned. Are both people in this conversation hoping for the same thing? If one person genuinely wants to understand, but the other just wants to win, it won't go well. If someone wants to express emotion, but the other is focused on facts, they'll miss each other completely. Before we engage, it's worth asking, do we both want clarity here? Or are we pulling in different directions? So the next time someone says something that bothers us, whether it's a coworker who questions our idea during a meeting, a friend who makes a comment that feels a little too sharp, or even someone at home who brings up a topic we weren't ready for, it might help to pause, just for a few seconds, and quietly ask ourselves, is this a real disagreement or just a moment of tension? Does this truly matter? Or are we just tired today? Are we even talking about one clear thing, or has it become about everything? And most importantly, are we both here to understand, or are we just trying to win? Because if the answer to those questions is unclear, maybe the conversation isn't ready to happen yet. We don't need to turn every disagreement into a debate. Some things can wait. Some things don't need fixing. And sometimes just choosing not to react right away is the most powerful move we can make. And that's exactly why the RISA framework is so helpful. It doesn't tell us what to say. It helps us decide when and whether to speak at all. Stop fighting, start connecting. Sometimes we think we're afraid of being wrong, but really what we're afraid of is not being understood. Think about the last time someone disagreed with you, maybe at work or in your home. Maybe they said something that made you feel small or like your opinion didn't matter. That's something many of us experience, especially as adults. We've spent years building our beliefs, our values, our way of thinking, like carefully stacking blocks to shape who we are. So when someone questions one of those blocks, even gently, it can feel like they're shaking the whole structure. Not just the idea itself, but us, the person behind it. And that's why so many debates quickly shift into defense. But here's something that might help shift how we see it. Debate isn't about destroying the other side. It's about sharpening our own thinking. It means we don't have to treat disagreement like a battle. We can treat it like a workout, something that stretches us, shapes us, and helps us grow. Here's a real moment I once saw. A team was in a meeting. One person, quiet, a bit nervous, spoke up and suggested changing how they did a task. Everyone else looked at the manager expecting a firm no. But instead, the manager paused and simply said, what made you think of that? No judgment, just curiosity. And just like that, the room softened. People leaned in. From that day forward, others began speaking up more because they saw it was safe. Sometimes we think we need to win, but most of the time we just need to feel heard. And that changes everything. The art of listening and responding. There's a quiet skill that almost no one teaches, and yet it changes everything about how we argue, discuss, and connect. It's the art of listening. Not listening to respond, not listening to correct, but listening to understand what hasn't been fully said. In competitive debate, there's a golden rule. Listen for the strongest version of your opponent's argument. Because if you only respond to the weak parts, you haven't really won. You've just avoided the real conversation. But this isn't just for competitions. It works in everyday life too. Let's say someone disagrees with you about how to handle a situation at work. Instead of rushing to defend your idea, what if you paused and said, so if I hear you right, you're saying this would be more efficient because it reduces confusion, right? That one sentence does something powerful. It tells the other person that they've been heard, not just their words, but their intention. And once people feel heard, they stop fighting. They start talking. Sometimes people struggle to express what they really mean. Their words come out too fast, too sharp, or too emotional, and it's easy to shut down or push back. But what if, instead, we help them? What if we said, wait, can you say that again another way? I want to make sure I get it. In that moment, the conversation shifts from defense to discovery. Because here's something magical that often happens when we really listen. We realize part of us actually agrees. Or we remember a time when we felt the same. And suddenly the person in front of us doesn't feel like the other side. They just feel human. So no, the winner of a conversation isn't the one who speaks the most. Sometimes it's the one who listens the deepest. The side switch exercise, a tool used by masters. If we want to become more persuasive, there's one exercise that may sound strange at first, but it works. It's called the side switch. In debate, before stepping onto the stage, even the most experienced debaters take a moment to write down 3 or 4 of the best possible reasons for the opposing side. Not to mock them, not to twist their words, but to truly try and understand what might make a thoughtful person believe something different. Because here's the thing. When we feel absolutely sure that we're right, it becomes harder to see clearly. There was once a university student who spoke out fiercely against a public speaker's views. But later, as part of a class assignment, she had to try the side switch exercise. After several painful hours of research and reflection, she wrote a short note to the speaker. It simply said, I still don't agree with you. But now, I understand why you think the way you do. Thank you for making me think harder. That moment didn't change her position, but it changed something deeper. Her willingness to listen, to doubt just enough to keep learning. And that's where real growth begins, with a little bit of intellectual humility and a quiet willingness to stand in someone else's shoes. If there's one thing we've learned throughout this video, it's that the way we argue often says more about our fears than our logic. We don't just want to be right. We want to feel understood, respected, safe to speak. That's why the RISA framework matters. It gives us a moment to breathe before we dive into a discussion. It helps us ask, is this disagreement real? Is it even worth our energy? Are we being clear about what we're talking about? And are both of us here for the same reason? These aren't just questions, they're reminders. They remind us that not every fight is necessary. And not every moment is the right one to respond. We also saw that listening is more than just staying quiet until it's our turn to speak. It's about making the effort to hear the best version of what someone is trying to say, even if they're struggling to say it well. Sometimes that shift alone can turn tension into trust. And perhaps the boldest move of all is when we take the time to stand in the other person's shoes. Not to agree, but to understand. In the end, the real win isn't the argument. It's the relationship we protected along the way. If this video helped, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so more people can turn arguments into something better.